We're live.
It was so exciting to sit here.
Your excitement resonating.
Kenny, I wasn't even joking.
Yes. All right, everyone, welcome back. It is 1 p.m., a little after 1 p.m. on Friday, January 30th. We are picking up work on H 841 and act relating to miscellaneous animal welfare procedures. And we have the bill sponsor, own Shane Waters Evans.
Yes, hello, I'm Shay Waters Evans. I sit over there normally on this committee, House Government Operations and Military Affairs. For those of you who were here for the beginning of this journey with the animal welfare, I apologize. You're going to hear the story about the goats again, but it's maybe you two will be excited about it. I mean, it's not exciting, but a few years ago, there were some goats in Charlotte that were being mistreated, and somebody wanted to report it, and they called our animal control officer who had moved to Florida and not told anybody. And then we don't have police in Charlotte, so they called the neighboring police, who said, sorry, we can't do anything about it, call the state police. And they called the state police, and the state police said, sorry, we can't really do anything about it, we're very busy, which is understandable. They are busy with actual things like murders and stuff. So I understand that the goats weren't a priority. They're a priority for some people, but I get it. And then they said, call Fish and Wildlife, and which Fish and Wildlife said, goats are not fish, nor are they wildlife. So then they said, call agriculture, and they were like, well, there's nothing we can really do about it. They didn't have enforcement capabilities, right? So then it just started this whole journey of me trying to figure out where we could get help for it, and then ended up eventually with a couple other legislators, we created the the Division of Animal Welfare, which is in the Department of Public Safety. The first job was to hire a director of animal welfare, who we heard from this morning. And then her charge was to, within 8 months of beginning her job, to share a report. And we asked her for a bunch of information. You saw and heard about that report this morning. I did. So this bill is not really based on her report, although some things kind of interact, or, there's some crossover. I spoke with her. I spoke with some advocates from various animal welfare and other groups that are animal adjacent, and just wanted to make sure that we are coming up with something that is a good slow ramping up to hopefully someday having a really good, solid, functional, multifaceted division of animal welfare. But we have to start somewhere. We don't have a lot of money, as you might have heard, in the state budget to start this kind of thing. So it's only 16 pages. I'm not going to walk through the whole thing with you, but I'm going to point out some things and tell you why I thought it was a good idea to put it in this bill, or why the advocates I spoke with thought it was a good idea to include it. You ready? Here we go. All right. The goat story wasn't that long, was it? I can tell it in great detail, and as I have many times before. Okay, so the first thing is, if you want to look at on page 5, we are hopefully the director of animal welfare and the Division of Animal Welfare can make some adjustments as a rulemaking decision, rather than having everything be in statute. That will streamline things and not be so involved in the process and stuff. The next part, if you're looking at line 14, you heard a little bit about it this morning, is certified rabies vaccinator program, which we'll touch on later, but that is something that we wanted to add. Oh, wait, hold on. I skipped the good part, which is line 11. Cats, I have learned, are the greatest, the most frequent domestic animals that carry rabies, and they're not required to be vaccinated. Dogs are required to be vaccinated for rabies. And as we heard this morning in testimony from the director of animal welfare, dogs barely spread or get rabies anymore. So this provision, line 11, would require outdoor cats to be vaccinated for rabies, which means registered, like you would register your dog with the town to do so for cats. If you have an indoor cat that just has a nice catio, hangs out outside the window, that cat is okay. And yes, a patio.
No, I.
It's a patio for a cat.
Exposed to that term of art.
It's a thing. It's like a screened-in porch that it attaches to a window for a cat to hang out on. Yeah. So those cats are okay. They're not going to get rabies hanging out in the catio. But if they're outside, they're an outdoor cat, then it's anyway. In my opinion, it is more efficient, less expensive, and safer for everybody to require this now rather than having everybody getting rabies and then dealing with that later on. That's just why that's in there. I believe there's some folks who enjoy cats very much who are not going to be fully supportive of that, but I also know that they love their cats a lot and don't want them to get rabies. So just think about that. All right. The next, at the bottom of page 5, it gives the director of animal welfare the authority to inspect. Wait, is that the part? It's to inspect. Yes, that's right. Because.
Sorry, we're still on 5?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my focus.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thing.
So basically, if the animal welfare director, anybody has the authority to inspect facilities, to, have the same authority as the to inspect these facilities, it means that they are going to be able to prevent things from happening before it gets to a problem area. We are trying to take everything that everyone is doing from all over the place and put it under one roof. Right, and it's one step to making it so. Just briefly, middle of page 6, it's just allowing the animal welfare fund, which has already been established, to accept gifts and donations. That's not unusual in state government. I cannot remember at the moment what other departments and divisions are allowed to do this, but I know that it's possible and other people did. So we're just allowing them to do that. And then page 7, line 16. We have limited the number of dogs that a person may have to 35. It does seem like a lot of dogs, but I did consult with some folks who have hunting kennels. We do not want to prevent them from having all the dogs they need to go hunting and to have that be a part of their sport. And so it also, though, if we top it there, then it can do some good work to kind of temper maybe a proliferation of puppy mills and other dog breeding operations that are unlicensed. Page 8, line 14. Vermont allows wolf hybrids. I want to say most, but I'm not sure. Many states do not allow for them, which means that sometimes these wolf hybrid animals end up in Vermont because they are allowed here. And they can be dangerous and cause injury to people. So this is allowing them. If you want to get a license for a wolf hybrid, they have to be altered, spayed or neutered, so that they cannot make any more wolf hybrids. Moving on. We already talked about it a little bit. Okay, so page 10, section 5 at the bottom, line 16. You heard a little bit about it this morning from the director of animal welfare. about how if we have a certified rabies vaccinator program, those folks would be able to vaccinate animals for rabies without, being a fully a veterinarian. As we heard, there's a shortage. It's difficult for people in rural areas to get them. Vet appointments can be expensive. So allowing people to get this license to be a certified rabies vaccinator would mean that more people could get their animals vaccinated. We use the money from the dog licenses. We use some of it to do these rabies drops, where they drop the treats. Maybe I'm simplifying, they drop the treats in the forest from the plains for the animals to eat, right? And so that they don't get rabies. But wouldn't it be nice if nobody got rabies in the first place, right? For as few people as possible. I keep saying people, but I mean animals. The people are not getting the problem. Exactly. It's not the problem right now. Okay, so that whole section is about the rabies vaccinator. There's a little bit in the bottom of page 11 about collecting some data. I think in general, that has been a problem across the state, which is why we started this to begin with. People are not collecting information and keeping it in all one spot. And it's really hard to make policy decisions and financial decisions if we don't know what we're working with. So that would be great. I believe shelters. Yes, and animal shelter and rescue organizations are going to be required to keep some data. I believe they do mostly keep it anyway. It's just they need to report it to the Director of Animal Welfare. We are adding on page 12, we are adding pet dealers to the list of people who need to be have a certificate of, or who can be denied a certificate of registration. It's animal shelters, rescue organizations, other entities where you could buy or sell a pet. Just adding pet dealers to that list. And I know I'm talking fast, but it's Friday afternoon. Okay, so if we're on page 14 now. The reason why we want people to not bring unlicensed or unregistered organizations bringing animals into our state is because there are a lot of, you could just show up with a truck full of puppies from South Carolina and nobody knows where they came from. Nobody knows, if they've been treated for their various vaccines and all that stuff. And what we really want to do is it's a public safety and a public health issue, right? To make sure that we know where these animals are coming from. Just asking that they come from a registered place somewhere else. Same with the insurance. I think it's obvious why we would need pet dealers and animal shelters, et cetera, to be required to have insurance. Animals can sometimes do things that aren't safe, and we want to make sure that people are protected. And then this last, let's see, this last part. Yes, Ledge Council is going to walk you through kind of the less boring things, or the more boring things, but like not boring because they're not important, but just because they don't need a why. Like they're kind of obvious. The only other thing I wanted to tell you about is you can see on social media, if you're looking at like on Instagram at like a rescue organization that has puppies. I do this a lot. I do not want a puppy, but I want a puppy. So I look all the time, and you will see at the bottom of the advertisement, I'll say this animal is located in Tennessee and this is the license number of whatever organization is offering it up for adoption. And it would require this for Vermont. We can't require people in other states to do things, but it would require if it was a Vermont-based rescue or shelter of some kind to disclose that information in an advertisement, where the animal is located and what the organization's registration number is. That's it.
Any questions for the member from the table? Sandy, sorry, Rep Pistol. Friday.
And back to requiring cats to be licensed.
Yes.
Do we know what we're gonna be asking for the fee for that? Is it gonna be in this dogs? Is it?
I believe that would fall under the rulemaking authority of the Director of Animal Welfare. So that might be a good question for her. In my mind, it's the same, but I guess we'll see how that works out. I believe it's $11 right now, right? For an animal?
Yeah, please.
And the not allowing, anybody to have more than 35 dogs. Would it make sense that if you are have a stipulation in there that Mrs. Smith down the road can't have 35 dogs, but the guy that uses them for hunting purposes can? I mean, is there some, you can put a cap on just personal collection of animals? We've recently had an episode in Danby, Tabor, where that house had 30-something dogs, and they were just all kinds of dogs.
Yeah.
And they were just a collector of dogs. And the house collapsed and it was terrible.
Well, so
And
sad.
they were able to rescue some of them and then not, and yeah, but anyways. There's no reason for that person to have that many. They're a hoarder of dogs.
Yes,
So I'm just wondering, I don't have a problem with somebody having 35 dogs if they are a breeder or a licensed hunter, or, you know what I'm saying, but nobody needs to have 35 dogs, I think personally.
no,
I don't know how you can do that, but
yeah, I know. I've thought about it a lot. I think there's a line between sort of limiting what people can do with their own lives and their own stuff. And in a way, you know, the pets are their belongings, you know, they're those things. I assume that there is a possibility that someone could have 35 dogs and everything could be fantastic. A lot of these situations where it's a pet hoarding situation, I believe, has there are other factors. There are mental health issues that need to be addressed. And it's tricky because even if you say, no, you can't have them, and then they do, then can you go and just take someone's property? Not really. So it's like, I was trying to find a balance between making sure that people who want to do those things recreationally or who want to be a reputable and like responsible breeder can do it, but also maybe and to say, if you are going to have 35 dogs, the ones that are altered, don't count.
Right.
So you can have as many dogs as you want if they're all spayed and neutered.
Any other questions for the member right now? No, all right. We'll go to council then.
Thank you.
You.
It's fun.
And I did communicate with Chair Lalonde, and we found it agreeable that this bill find its way back down here.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was committed to judiciary this morning on the floor, but that was not where it was supposed to go. So it's gonna come back here. Don't dare, you get to come
I
back.
didn't miss it.
Yeah.
He's like, back to judiciary you go, Eric.
Yeah.
Please join us, sir.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Eric Fitzpatrick with the Office of Legislative Counsel, here to talk with the committee some more about House Bill number H 841, an act relating to miscellaneous animal welfare procedures. I hadn't heard that that was committed to judiciary this morning, so yeah, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it raised a couple of eyebrows.
It was a real surprise to me.
All right. Well, I don't know if that's had anything to do with it, but as the committee probably knows, the Judiciary Committee is dealing with a separate bill that's related to animal cruelty and animal welfare, but more so because it's, as I'm sure you know from the work you've done on this over the last couple of years, there are so many animal welfare related statutes that are kind of spread out across various places in the Vermont statutes annotated, and quite a few of them are in Title 13, the criminal code, because animal cruelty and related provisions are criminal matters as well. So they're working on a bill that's pretty lengthy and has a little bit of crossover with some of what's in this bill. And I'll mention that as I do the walkthrough, but nothing contradictory, but more a crossover so that they could be complementary, but it's a good thing to keep in mind so that you don't pass contradictory things or they can be, and we do this in our office sometimes, you make sure that when the same section is amended in two different bills, that they make sense and they can work together instead of causing problems later on. So with that bit of background, the big picture on H 841 is it really doesn't deal with those criminal related provisions. It's more with the, as Representative Waters Evans mentioned, in Title 20, the Department of Public Safety, the Division of Animal Welfare that you created in 2023 became effective in 2025. Same with the Director of Animal Welfare position. And so the first couple of pages of the bill really there aren't any changes. I really just included those because I thought it might be useful for when you're looking at the changes that are being proposed in the bill to sort of be able to see, well, here's what we have already. And this is existing statute that you folks passed a couple of years ago, which, as I mentioned, became effective January 1st, 2025. So roughly a year ago, exactly. And so if you look at page 1, you'll see right there in Title 20, that new chapter that was added, Chapter 190, Division of Animal Welfare. That's where the division is created. Turn over to page 2. You'll see line 13 to 15, the Director of Animal Welfare, that's where that position is created, and they're in charge of the division. That's all in lines 14 and 15. And what does the Director of Animal Welfare do? Over onto page 3, you see subsection B there. Develop a comprehensive plan for the development, implementation, and enforcement of the animal welfares of the animal welfare laws of the state. So again, you have all these laws that are spread out all over the Vermont Code. And the idea here is to kind of be able to have a comprehensive plan for how to enforce those and regulate animal welfare in the state. So on down on to page 3, onto the rest of page 4, talks about what that plan has to include. And from what I understood that, and you look at sort of the over on line 13 through 17 of page 4, requires the the Director of Animal Welfare to submit this comprehensive plan to this committee. And I understood that happened this morning already. So it was perfect timing, perfect segue into the proposal here, which is really is to sort of augment some of what you already had that you passed a couple of years ago to add on some other responsibilities, duties, and types of authority for the director, because there's some stuff that you passed already. This adds a couple of other pieces. It adds some additional authority for the division as well. So you've got that, and that's going to be in the first section of the bill, which we'll start to look at now, which is over on page 5. So you can sort of think about the two in the bill rather in sort of these two separate big picture halves. One half is sort of adding to the authority, responsibility, and duties of the division and the director. And then in the second part, you're going to see also some specific regulations, like you were just talking about, for example, with respect to the number of dogs and things like that. Those are more specific regulatory pieces involving the animals themselves. So you got the duties of the sort of more structural government ops related stuff that you guys are so familiar with, as well as some details regarding limitations, rules, that sort of thing, applying to, sales, ownership, that sort of thing. So the first half, which I just mentioned, the division and the director, that starts on page 5. And Representative Waters Evans already spoke about a little bit about this, but starting in subsection E, line 7, this talks about the authority of the division to adopt rules. So this rulemaking authority doesn't exist in the, Act 167 from a couple of years ago when you passed that, did not have rulemaking authority for the division. So the proposal is to add it. There's two different types, permissive and a mandatory. So if you look at line 7, Division of Animal Welfare may adopt rules to implement the provisions of this chapter. So that's a broad rulemaking authority. So any of the provisions of that chapter that the director feels could be usefully added to by rule, they have the authority to do that. It's not required. It's permissive. On the other hand, line 9, Division of Animal Welfare shall adopt rules. And so these are two other things specifically that these rules are required. And those have to do with two different topics. First one is the outdoor cats that was also being discussed earlier. what does that have to entail, so to speak, with the outdoor cats? You'll see that they have to be vaccinated for rabies, spayed or neutered, and licensed. So those are the requirements that have to be in there. And because I don't know this myself, but I'm from talking to Michael Grady in our office, who you may remember is the attorney who worked on this bill a couple of years ago, saying that, one of the problematic issues that comes up in that particular area is defining outdoor cats. So that's why, rather than try to do that in statute, you'll see that that's delegated by rule to the director as well. So vaccination, spaying or neutering, licensing, and including a definition of outdoor cats has to be included in the rule. And the second part of the second issue that the rule has to address is their lines 14 and 15, that certified rabies vaccinator program that was also mentioned to you earlier. So that program has some broad outlines that you'll see when we get to it, but also requirement that the director adopt rules about the specifics of how that, because you see it's up to the director when we get to it. The director is the one who's going to be certifying the vaccinators and developing this training program for them. So that's not something that's far more detailed than you would ordinarily have in statute. So it delegates the authority to come up with the details by rule to the director. Two other things so that's the end of the rulemaking piece. So now two other expansions of the Director of Animal Welfare's authority you see in subsections F and G on page 5. The first one, subsection F, gives the director the same inspection authority as animal control officers have for pet dealers. See? So as well as animal shelters, rescue organizations, and kennels, et cetera. So currently, municipal animal control officers have inspection authority. So this is just saying Director of Animal Welfare has that same inspection authority as they already have. So it sort of adds them to the list in a sense. And same thing in subsection G, but not with respect to inspection. That's about licensing. So currently, again, you have municipalities have authority over animal licensing, over things like issuing the licenses, giving notices of violation, applying to the court for an injunction if somebody's violating their license, revoking or suspending a license if somebody violates the requirements, imposing penalties. All those things municipalities already have. So this adds the Division of Animal Welfare to the entities who can also regulate licenses in that same land. So that's where, again, so you think about it, sort of what's going on here. Oh yeah, so there's essentially additional authority being added to the division in these several different ways that I just mentioned. Little typo over on page 6 that I noticed, not a huge deal, but line 3, that suspend licenses. I'm striking that because that appears twice. It's also deal at the very end of lines 4 and 5. You see it also says and revoke or suspend licenses. So, strike those lines. So moving on now to the Animal Welfare Fund, also exists in current law. Again, it was in the bill that you folks passed a couple of years ago, and it specifically provides for what monies constitute the fund. That's starts on line 11. So you have this surcharge that exists already with respect to licensing. And you also have appropriations made by the General Assembly in line 14, and it adds 2 other pieces. Any donations or gifts, and as Representative Waters has mentioned, that's very common. There are plenty of different places in statute where different entities are allowed to accept gifts and donations as part of their special funds. And it also adds, which also is not unusual in statute, a checkoff on the state income tax return. So that exists for, a variety of things. The Green Up Fund has one, I think, for example, and the Veterans Fund has one. There's a number of different ones that exist, and you can check off. It's voluntary, but if you decide you want a portion of your refund to go to one of these causes, then you can check the box, and then it's automatically done by Department of Taxes. So it adds the Animal Welfare Fund to one of those entities that if a person wants to contribute a little bit via their tax refund, they can do it. So that's sort of the end of the kind of structural state government piece of it. Although there are little bits of it sort of also, you'll see the inspection authority and things like that we'll also see again. But now we're going to move on to some more specifics relating to regulation of animals, that sort of thing, which you also heard about a little bit earlier. So the first one, though, starts really on page 7, and that's the dog ownership limitation that was discussed over a number of 35 dogs. One thing I'd point out too is that though that it's not, there are some exclusions. So if you look on page 7, lines 17 to 19, when you calculate that number 35, don't include dogs that are less than 4 months old or dogs that have been spayed or neutered. So that 35 would only be either if they're older than 4 months and they haven't been spayed or neutered, then that's how the number would accumulate.
Oh.
Got a lot more.
Let's see, so that's that piece. All right, so turning to page 8. This has to do with wolf hybrids, and Representative Waters Evans was discussing this as well. This has to do with the fact that currently wolf hybrids are permitted in Vermont. This proposal is to add some limitations on that, and that has to do with licensing and again, spaying or neutering. So the idea is that in order, because wolf hybrids have to be licensed currently, that's already required. And this says, all right, but in order to get a license for a wolf hybrid that's 6 months of age or older, there has to be documentation provided that the animal was spayed or neutered. So that's how you get your license, has to be. So if it's not spayed or neutered, then you won't be able to get a license. And in that case, possession of the animal would not be permitted under the statute. Everybody follow that so far?
Mhm.
All right. So moving on then, section 3, this,
I got like one spot,
Yeah.
curious on just the wolf hybrid, maybe this is a better question for the gallery, but roughly, any idea how many wolf hybrids are in the state? Is it if they're like, okay, never mind. Thank you.
I believe it's hard to know because it's hard to keep track of them because nobody is really always registering them.
I just wasn't sure because of the licensing, if it was like cataloged somehow.
And those that do come in and say, oh, they're a shepherd mix.
Yeah. Get pulled to the terrier. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So the next section you see is really just a straightforward repeal of this particular section of law. And this is the special license that exists for breeders of domestic pets and wolf hybrids. So there's a special licensing system for breeders. And if you qualify for that, then you don't have to pay the sort of regular licensing fee that, say, an individual pet owner would own, someone who's not a breeder. So this repeals that. See, for example, if you look at page 9, lines 14 to 15, and this sort of gives you the big picture. The domestic pets and wolf hybrids covered by the special license pursuant to this subsection shall be exempt from other licensing fees. So the result of repealing this section would be that your general licensing fees would apply to the breeder, just in the same way that they apply to any other owner of pets currently. So that's how that section would work. I believe Representative Waters Evans also discussed section 4 over on page 10. This adds the the Division of Animal Welfare to the list of parties who can inspect the premises of pet dealers. Where you'll see that so the pet dealer's premises may be inspected upon the issuance of a permit. Who can do the inspection? Municipal Animal Control Officer, Law Enforcement Officer, and then line 8 adds the Director of Animal Welfare. So again, that's sort of expanding the authority of the director, similarly to the way that we looked at in the first couple of sections of the bill. You established in the next section, which you looked at, the Certified Rabies Vaccinator Program. Again, this is run by the Director of Animal Welfare. You see over on page 11, lines 1 through 3, the director establishes this program to train humane officers as certified rabies vaccinators. And it's going to be requirements and other elements that are developed by the director. And then under lines 6 and 7, it's up to the director to certify a humane officer who satisfactorily completes the program. So again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the rulemaking authority. This does not list all the requirements of the program and how it's going to be set out in detail. That's the sort of thing appropriate for rulemaking. So the statute, the bill earlier on specifically requires the director to adopt rules to describe how this program is going to work. A couple of requirements about certified rabies vaccinators. You see though in lines 8 through 13, they can't accept compensation and they're going to be immune from liability to the same extent as volunteers are who conduct or assist with rabies inoculations. So it's very similar to immunity that you have for various types of volunteer activity.
Representative Hango.
So does that mean that all of these certified rabies vaccinators shall be volunteers and not somebody who is, for instance, working for a veterinarian and the veterinarian decides that this person can work extra hours doing this program if they get certified?
That's the way I read it. So not to say that person who say is a veterinarian or a vet tech or whoever it may be, who not to say they are prohibited from doing it as part of their job. It doesn't say that. But yes, I think the way I read this is if you have this separate position or I should, certified role as a certified rabies vaccinator. Yeah, I'm reading that as being, they can't be compensated for it. So it's a volunteer role. Okay, so moving on to section 6, page 11. This has to do with some information collection that is already required when shelters and rescue organizations accept animals. So they are already required to collect this information, but the proposed amendment to the existing authority provides that it adds to the list of, entities to whom they have to report that information, the Division of Animal Welfare. So they get the information as well about animals that are accepted by shelters and rescue organizations. And there's a slight tweak in language there. You'll see that the way it's written now says they have to make every effort to collect the information. The way the proposal is to say they shall collect the information if it's available. So slight difference there. Over onto page 12, we kind of talked this a little bit already, and this has to do, we're back to adding pet dealers to some of the other legal requirements that exist already. So for example, in section 7, and pet dealers do have to get permits under current law. So that's currently required. So this permits, denial or revocation of the permit in the same circumstances as shelters or rescue organizations, et cetera, can have their licenses revoked. So for example, if you look at line 10, that's existing law. If it's determined that the housing facilities or enclosures are inadequate for feeding, watering, sanitizing, housing, then the license can be revoked. And that's existing practice for rescue organizations, shelters, et cetera. And this adds pet dealers. So they're going to be subject to that same regulation. And the same with the penalties for violations. That's the next section, section 8. So if you fail to comply, say, with the terms of your license or these requirements for sheltering, that sort of thing, you can be subject to penalties. That's over on page 13, for example, if they operate without having their license, they operate anyway. Or if they violate any other provision of the chapter, that's all like lines 3 through 6. Any one of those things happen, the pet shop, the animal shelter, the rescue organization, et cetera, they can be fined. You see that line 6, $300, 6-month imprisonment. That's the existing penalty, which is a criminal misdemeanor. So this adds, again, pet dealer to that list of entities that could be subject to those penalties as well. So the penalties already exist. This just adds one other entity who could be subject to them.
There you go.
Why does this keep referencing pet shops if we don't allow them to operate in Vermont anymore, which was my understanding from another testimony on a different day?
It's a very good question. I don't know. I don't know about if pet shops aren't allowed anymore, and if they don't exist, then it shouldn't be there. But I'm going to defer to the people who know more about this than I do as to whether or not that's the case.
Thought I heard that the other day, that pet shops aren't allowed. in Vermont.
To the.
So,
Yeah, did you identify yourself?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Lisa Milet, Director of Animal Welfare. So pet shops are not allowed to sell cats and dogs, but they can sell rabbits, reptiles,
Okay,
all sorts of others. The Department of Agriculture, Agency of Agriculture does license those sort of pet shops, so that's separate from. I think that's the distinction, is that cats and dogs are not in pet shops.
okay, so would this fall under the director of, would pet shops then fall under the director of animal welfare if cats and dogs aren't allowed to be sold there?
I have not read this bill, so when I get
Okay.
comments on it, I can give
That's okay.
full comments on it.
Great, thank you. If you would find out, because maybe that is in a different part of statute than this. Or maybe it should be in the agriculture statutes and not here. Thanks.
Back to you, council.
All right, thank you. So now we're moving on to, on page 13, this is the topic of animals, dogs, cats, ferrets, wolf hybrids that are imported into the state from out of state. So that's the kind of topic we're talking about for a moment. And currently, there's some current regulation in those situations. You see the existing laws there on page 13, starts on line 13, actually, at page 13. So they have to be, line 14 should have to be accompanied by an official health certificate or similar certificate of inspection issued by line 16, a veterinarian licensed in the state or country of origin. So if it's coming in from out of state, it's got to have some documentation associated with the animal. This adds some other additional requirements in this situation. In other words, so the animals being coming into Vermont for purposes of sale, it's not an individual who's bought it somewhere else, bringing it for, but if they're being brought to Vermont for purposes of sale, resale, exchange, et cetera, then it adds over on page 14 that if the animal is being imported by, and this is line 5, by a shelter or rescue organization in another state, then that shelter or rescue organization must be licensed in the originating state. There's another layer of requirement when an animal is imported for sale to Vermont. All right, now there's a few other topics kind of in a row here at the very end of the bill. You'll see we're on section 10, which is page 14, and this has to do with requiring insurance. So pet dealers, animal shelters, rescue organizations, and keepers of animals for breeding purposes shall, as a condition of their licenses or certificates of registration, because they have to be licensed or get certificates of registration. So as a condition of that, they are required to maintain a commercial reasonable level of general liability, presumably cover fights and situations like that. I ran this language by Maria Royal, who's the attorney in our office who deals with insurance matters, and she had this suggestion for how to do it. And she said, well, one way when you require insurance is you can put it in as a condition of their licensure. So that's why that approach is taken here. You'll see there's an advertising regulation in section 11. This is when animals are advertised for adoption in Vermont. This is a couple of pieces of information that are required to be included in the advertisement. The first one is the current location of the animal. And the second one is the advertiser's license number, if any. So if they advertise, that information has to be included. That's actually, this language is somewhat similar to, I based it on, there's some advertising requirements for commercial sellers of cannabis. So it's in their rules, it's in the Cannabis Control Board rules. So it just seemed, rather than reinventing the wheel, when you're talking about advertising, you are talking about speech. So chose something that was in law already. Now, there's a specific language for social advertising on social media accounts, which you also heard about earlier. That's over on the top of page 15. And this provides that with respect to social media accounts specifically, so not other kinds of advertising, then those requirements that we just talked about, location, advertiser's license number, only apply to advertisers located in Vermont or subject to 3915. That's the section we just looked at. Those are people that import animals into Vermont for purposes of sale. So, and that, if you're doing it via social media, that's when you would be covered by those requirements. And so the last section of the bill, other than the effective date, is what we talked about earlier, which is the checkoff on your income tax return. So again, it's a voluntary thing, not required. You see line 7, page 15. It's an opportunity. That's all it is, not required. And so individual returns on this form that the Department of Taxes develops. And this language was also, I read this by Kirby Keaton, who's our attorney who does taxation. And he actually came up with this suggestion himself. And he's based on the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that, you know, the Children's Trust Fund, the Veterans Fund, Green Up, et cetera, all also had these options on the tax forms as well. So the language is really very similar to places that already exist in the Vermont Tax Code Title 32 for those other entities. So, and essentially this just allows you to have a portion of your refund deducted and donated to one of those organizations if you choose to. And turning to the effective date on the very last page, the act takes effect on passage. And that's really it.
All right.
Happy to answer any questions or follow up on anything later on if people have questions later on, either way.
Oh, great. Questions for council? I think between Rep. Waters Evans' introduction and your walkthrough, I personally have a pretty good understanding
Good,
of the proposal.
good.
I don't think I have any immediate questions right now.
Yep.
Great, let's vote on it tomorrow.
I want to take some time to look at the.
I was joking.
No,
I was
no,
joking.
what I want to say is I'd like to see a side, I'm gonna print my own off, but do a side by side of what we just had and the bill and see, make sure that the report is comparing with this and we can tweak it and make it such.
Enthusiasm for the animal stuff.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I forgot to mention one thing. I'll just add just for a second, just because I wanted to give the committee a heads up on the places where the House Judiciary's bill are working on the same sections. And I meant to mention that as I was doing that. Apologies.
Those sections?
They are in sections, page 6. The Animal Welfare Fund. And where's the rulemaking authority? Oh, page 5. So it's page 5 and 6. It's the rulemaking authority and
For the
fund.
pages, what did you have? Sections?
Yeah, it's section, is that all one section or something? Section 1.
Section 1.
Yep.
Pages.
Right. So the proposal in this bill is to add some rulemaking authority for the Division of Animal Welfare. The House Judiciary Bill does the same thing on a different topic. They're talking about rules related to forfeiture, criminal forfeiture, that sort of thing. Whereas here, as you remember, it's about outdoor cats being licensed, certified rabies vaccinator, that sort of thing. So it's different topics, but both having to do with rulemaking authority. And Animal Welfare Fund similarly also adds some revenue that would be going into the Animal Welfare Fund that is related to bonds that security that people are required to pay if their animals are seized in these forfeiture proceedings.
Yeah, Chair Lalonde referenced that bill for us to do a flyby on some of the language next week.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think we targeted Thursday for that.
Yep. That sounds good.
Anything else from Mr. Fitzpatrick? All right, that runs us up. Did you have a question?
Think so. It's not.
Go for it. We still have 5 minutes of clock to the next item. Almost out of here, Eric.
So close. Maybe I'll sort of move in that direction.
See you sliding.
Right.
Not sure who this question is for either, but I just was wondering if there's any danger in the because it sounds like some of the authorities are being added to the Animal Welfare Division that already exist among other people that work with animals. And since we're trying to streamline the chain of command when it comes to who does what with animals, I was just wondering, is would there be any issue anticipated with potential confusion?
It is an interesting question. It's probably one that, you might direct not only to the director, but maybe, I don't know if the plan is, but to have some people who serve in those other entities, who are in that list to come in and say, hey, what do you think? Is it going to be in some way, creating some kind of cross purposes situation, or would it be redundant, or is it on the other hand, would it be helpful to have more people with the authority to do it? So I think those folks would be the best ones to ask that question to, but it's a good question.
Anyone else? All right.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yes, happy to do it.
We'll
That
be
was
back
fun.
at 2:00 for the final order of business for the week, which is 588. A little bit more on OPR.